As I mentioned many times, my channel and practically all my videos are made for other Jews. And I don't choose, of course, the algorithm that the YouTube is using, but for one reason or another, it seems that a lot of religious Christians get suggestions to watch my videos. And that's why a lot of times I get comments like, read Isaiah 53 or Zechariah or this or that. Many religious Christians, of course, know, especially the late prophets, so this is one of their favorites, and the various arguments that I get. I don't really want to try to respond to the numerous arguments that this polemics between Jews and Christians has been going on for ages, and generally Jews try to avoid it because we don't have any mitzvah, any command to try to convert everybody to Judaism. In fact, the opposite is true. As opposed to the missionaries who are trying to convert everybody to Christianity, we're not trying to convert anybody to Judaism. As far as we're concerned, if a person, righteous ben Noach, what's called a righteous descendant of Noah, keeps the 7 basic laws, which are, it's not even the 10 commandments. Christians try to emphasize 10 commandments all the time, but here it's just 7, really. What we believe in terms of what is required to be a righteous person, if the person is not Jewish, it's enough to keep just the 7 commandments. And we don't really try to convert anybody to Judaism. So in effect, in a way, it's an unfair situation that Christians are interested in converting the Jews. The Jews are not interested in converting the Christians. The opposite. If some Christian wants to come and says to a rabbi, I want to convert to Judaism, he'll probably be discouraged. He's supposed to be told that, look, it's much better to be a righteous Gentile, what's called a righteous ben Noach, than to convert to Judaism. And then later, if you don't keep some commandments, and Judaism has a lot of commandments, then you'll be basically a bad Jew. Much better to stick where you are. I mean, there's a reason why some people are born Jewish, some people are not. But according to the Jewish view, those who are not born Jewish, they don't need to become Jewish in order to get what Christians usually love this word salvation, to be saved. I don't really like this word. Don't need to save. By default, people are good, and if they don't do anything terrible and they lead a moral life, they will get some kind of a share in the world to come from Jewish point of view. So what the Christians call be saved, right? If we use that term, we could say that the non-Jews are also able to be saved by being good Bnei Noach. So why in the world would they want to convert? If I wasn't born Jewish, I don't know if I would convert to Judaism. Even if I knew a lot about Judaism, if I knew what I know now, I don't know if I would convert. Maybe I'd remain and try to be a good ben Noach. I don't know. But my point is that this is what the rabbi is supposed to do. If a non-Jew comes and says, I want to convert, we don't try to encourage it. We're not jumping out of joy. Oh, this is so great. So many people will convert to Judaism. We're a small nation. We're really very, very small. A lot of people don't realize. I remember, I wasn't born, by the way, religious. I was born in the Soviet Union. I didn't know much about religion. But I knew I was Jewish. And when we came to America, I went to Stuyvesant High School. This is considered one of the better schools here, a school that teaches specifically, emphasizes math and physics. And I remember I was in a class, I think it was a history class, and the teacher, for some reason, I don't know why he asked this question, but he asked the class, which was mostly non-Jewish people in that class, how many Jews they think there are in America. And some people had numbers like 40%, 20%. A lot of people don't realize that by the way, the teacher was Jewish, so maybe, in New York you meet more Jews, of course, than in most of the United States. But in any case, these numbers are so exaggerated, people don't realize how tiny our nation is. We're something like 2.5%, I think, of in the United States. It's a very tiny group, and in the world we're much less than 1/10. We're like something like 1/10 of 1%. I'm not sure exactly, maybe a little bit more, 2/10 of 1%. We're a very tiny group. And just to give an example, there is a relatively small Christian denomination called Seventh-day Adventists. chances are you never met one. You probably heard about them, but these are the people who emphasize, they think, that's why they call that why Seventh-day Adventists, they emphasize keeping Shabbat, the Sabbath. Now, they don't keep exactly like we do, but they keep based on what they find in the prophets and writings in different books. They try to keep the seventh day, which is Saturday, of course, not Sunday. So that's why they're called Seventh-day Adventists. So it's a very small group. Obviously, the vast majority of Christians don't try to keep Shabbat, don't keep the seventh day. But this particular group is very small, and as I said, most people never met one in person. And yet there is more even of Seventh-day Adventists than there are Jews. The Jews is a very tiny nation. We're very, very small. And by the way, the Torah calls us very small. The Torah predicts that we'll be small. So we're not trying to increase ourselves by converting 1 billion people into Judaism. Probably if we did missionary activity and tried to encourage people to convert to Judaism, we would have a lot of people converting, but we're not interested in that at all. And we're not told to do that at all. So that's why I usually ignore various comments, because what's the point of arguing with a person who has a purpose? He wants us to convert, but I'm not interested in converting him or convincing him that he is wrong. But I decided I'll make a small video. Certainly I don't have time to answer every comment, and even most comments I ignore completely, but I decided to make a small video just to present very concisely the points. So you could view it as a kind of answer of why we actually don't convert. Again, my purpose is not to convince anybody, and very few people ever get convinced to change their mind anyway. But my purpose is to explain, at least. Next time you see an Orthodox Jew, you'll know why an Orthodox Jew is not interested in Christianity and why it's useless to try to influence us. So, in my humble opinion, a lot of times people get bogged down in details without realizing the big picture. And this is completely true in the case of the missionary activity. So most Christians think they have all these proofs for Christianity, and of course they use our Torah, our Bible, in order to prove. And that's why they say, okay, look, you're reading the same Bible, we'll prove it to you, right? Why don't you see the obvious proofs? And, they'll bring a proof here from Isaiah, that one from Zechariah, this one from Psalms. But the big picture is completely, even if there were some of their so-called proofs, even if they had some merit, the point is that once you look at the big picture, it makes zero sense. And I'll tell you why. I'll give just 3 simple arguments that are very easy to understand. If you listen carefully to what I'm saying, you'll understand my point of view, and it's the point of view of the vast majority of Orthodox Jews. That doesn't mean that we cannot cooperate on certain other things. I would say that Orthodox Jews and religious Christians have quite a bit in common in terms of the general morale that we want to promote in this country, as opposed to the progressive so-called our voting patterns. So we could work together on certain things. And in terms of religious things, I think the best thing is let's agree to disagree. As I said, our point of view is we don't try to convert everybody to Judaism. So at any rate, the first and most obvious argument, which I think any reader of the Bible should be very clear on, is that the Jewish people, in a way were spoiled, that our history is predicted beforehand. We know exactly what's going to happen to us, and nowhere does it say that in less than half of the time period of our history, right? Christianity appeared about 2,000 years ago, and our history as a nation is over 3,000 years old. So in somewhat like 1,300 years of our history, all of a sudden we would make a tremendous mistake from Christian point of view of not accepting the Messiah. And from then on, basically we're all wrong for 2,000 years. And then in the end of days, this is the Protestant point of view, of course, is that we were wrong for all these 2,000 years. They're the ones who preserved the correct tradition. We're the ones who are completely wrong. And at the end of days, we're supposed to learn from them and change our mind and fix whatever we didn't do some 2,000 years ago. So most of our history, according to this, we're wrong. Now, what does the Torah actually say about our history, and what does it predict? It says that a lot of times we'll sin. There are all kinds of sins in the Torah, from somewhat ritual commandments, like, for instance, wearing a cloth that's made of linen and wool, called shatnez, to more general moral sins and moral failures, being dishonest, not paying the workers on time, not opening the hand in tzedakah, in charity, breaking Shabbat, very important, Shabbat, the Sabbath, kashrut, all kinds of laws in the Torah, some ritual, some between people, and all of them are important. And the Torah tells us that, unfortunately, our nation, both the books of the Bible that talk about what already happened and the books that predict what will happen, they all discuss the fact that a lot of times we failed. Yechezkel, for instance, Ezekiel, right, the prophet, is criticizing us on all kinds of failures, both moral and ritual failures, and many other prophets. Basically, that was the job of the prophets. Note, by the way, an interesting thing, that the later prophets, we usually divide the Bible into 3 parts. The first part is 5 books of Moshe. Those ones we had to get. That's where all the commandments are. No new commandments were given by the prophets. The prophets, their main job was to criticize us. And sometimes they predicted certain things or wrote what happened in our history, but the Talmud openly tells us that if we did not sin, we wouldn't get those books. Except the Sefer Yoshua, the book of Joshua, but I'm not going to discuss that right now. So for the most part, most of the prophets we got through our sin in a certain sense. So all the important things have to be in the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moshe. Everything else was due to our sins and due to the criticism of the Jewish people. So whatever the case may be, what does the Torah tell will happen to us? So we will be sinning, unfortunately, and we will be exiled because of that, and the land will be almost empty throughout most of our exile, and then later we'll be ingathered. And this is how the Torah, for instance, describes the ingathering and the tshuva, most importantly, how we will do tshuva, the repentance, how the Jewish people will repent. This is from the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy. It's close to the end of the 5 books of Moshe. After it describes all the curses, all the punishments, in the 28th chapter, it goes on to say like this: there shall come a time. By the way, here there is no question of translation. A lot of times the dispute between Christians and Jews is on the specific translation of a verse. Like the known verse in the 7th chapter of Isaiah, 14th verse, whether it's talking about a young woman or talking about a virgin. The whole issue of virgin birth has to do with the translation that Christians specifically like to use for the word that does not mean a virgin. At least anywhere else in Hebrew, the same word just means a young woman. But here, what I'm going to read to you, there will be no questions of translation. You can open any Christian Bible, it will say exactly the same thing. I mean, maybe not exactly the same words, but the message will be exactly the same. There shall come a time when you shall experience all the words of the blessing and the curse that I presented to you. There, among the nations where God has banished you, you will reflect on the situation. You will then return to God, right? This is the tshuva process. A lot of people today, like myself, for instance, right? Lots of Jews who were born in non-religious families who become religious and start observing the commandments. So this is the process that it's describing at the end of days. You'll return to God your Lord. You'll obey Him, doing everything that I'm commanding you today. You and your children, with all your heart and with all your soul. God will bring back your remnants and have mercy on you. God your Lord will once again gather you from among the nations where He scattered you. Even if your diaspora is at the ends of heavens, God will gather you from there, and He will take you back. And He will bring you back to the land that your ancestors occupied, and you will occupy it. God will be good to you, make you flourish even more than your ancestors. He will remove the barriers from your hearts and from the hearts of your descendants, so that you will love God your Lord with all your heart and with all your soul, etc., etc. Read the whole chapter. It's a very beautiful chapter, and of course it's a lot of inspiration, and a lot of these things are happening in front of our eyes. The tshuva of the Jewish people, there are a lot of Baalei tshuva, a lot of repentance going on, many more observers of, for instance, Shabbat and other laws than, for instance, 100 years ago. But one thing for sure is that it's very clear in our history what exactly is supposed to happen. Nowhere does it say that instead, right, somewhere less than half throughout our history, we will not accept the correct Messiah, make a huge mistake, and because of that we'll be punished, and then the end of days we'll come and learn how the non-Jews who preserved the correct information, and they will teach us, and from there we will learn the true ways of God, and we will accept the tradition that for 2,000 years was kept by non-Jewish people, all these nations. In fact, the Bible is very clear in many places, like in Jeremiah, I think 16th chapter, in the end of Micah, and many other prophets, that it's the non-Jews in the end of days that will come to learn from us. The beginning of Isaiah, for instance, right, the mountain of the Lord, things like that. It's very clear that the non-Jews will come and say, "Ach sheker nachalu avateinu." We inherited incorrect religion. It's the Jews who were right all this time. So it's very clear, at least, that the Torah openly predicts exactly what will happen and for what will be punished. And it's not going to be for not accepting the Messiah, or that the whole correct religion for all this time was preserved by non-Jews, and we're supposed to learn from them at the end of days. This just makes no sense. So the very fact that the Jewish people did not accept the person who Christians consider Messiah is by definition the proof that this is not at least what the Bible meant. Now, as an aside, there is nowhere even a command like that to accept the Messiah. Most of the time that the Bible talks about the times of Messiah, the Messianic age, all the great things that will happen, the utopian times, no wars, for instance, right? The types of things that, for instance, the UN wrote based on Isaiah. There is a similar passage in a different prophet, in Micah, right? That there won't be any swords made. Instead, the money that goes for the war will instead go for the work of the land, right? All this budget that goes for war today, and unfortunately, the wars are sometimes a necessity. If we in the world we live, if the better nations will not use a lot of money for the budget of what's called defense, then the worst nations will use all their power to destroy us, right? That's the unfortunate reality. So the war is a necessity today in many cases, but. You could just imagine if, for instance, the United States would not be spending all these billions of dollars on the war. What would happen? All the wicked around the world, or let's say during World War II, if the Allies didn't try to stop Hitler, right? All the wicked would then use their power. But it's the deterrence that the better nations have strong weapons that a lot of times stops the worst escalations of wars. So today, this is the reality. But we're hoping one day, as the prophets saw, that there won't be need for war. And in that case, right, if everybody will agree, let's just live and let live, then there will be so much money that can be used for, let's say, cancer research or something. The truth is that in those times people will live very, very long. The prophet said about that too. A lot of things are said about Messianic age. Much less is said about the specific person who will be in the times of Messianic age, our king, right, the descendant of David, King David. So this is what we believe about the Messiah, is just that this is going to be a person. And this leads me to the next, one of the strongest arguments against the concepts of Christianity. Practically 99% of Christians believe in the idea of Trinity. This is true about Catholics, about Protestants, vast majority of Protestants, and about the Greek Orthodox. So the three main branches of Christianity all believe in Trinity, even though there are slight differences in terms of the interpretation of this. Now again, this is not just something they believe. This is what the Christians consider a kind of fundamental principle of faith. And again, the same argument applies. If this is correct, chas v'shalom, if this is really the correct understanding, first of all, we would expect it in the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moshe. Like I said, all the important things have to be in the 5 books of Moshe. The later prophets who lived hundreds of years later would not be able to add some fundamental new thing, neither a commandment nor an understanding, because if they did, what about all the Jews who lived throughout the time before that? Let's say if Trinity would be hinted in by Isaiah, as some Christians believe. Let's for a moment assume that. But what about before Isaiah? How were the Jews supposed to know about this fundamental principle from Christian point of view? This is a very important principle for Christians. It's the most important principle there is. And the most they can offer is some kind of slight hints that, okay, maybe it's hinted like this or like that. Even if these were the hints, how could they hint to a fundamental principle? All the important things Torah says many times. For instance, during the Passover, every day we read a different passage that talks about Pesach from the Chumash, from the 5 books of Moshe. So just in the 5 books of Moshe, there are 8 different passages all over that talk about Pesach alone, Passover. Shabbat, every book of Torah all over the place talks about Shabbat. Important things are mentioned in the Torah very, very, very many times. And here you have something that for Christians became the principle of faith, the most fundamental dogma, and it's not mentioned anywhere except maybe by minor hints somewhere in the late prophets or whatever, even if it would be in the Chumash. But there's no clear pasuk. The Torah would have to be very clear on this issue if this were true. In fact, the opposite is true, and that is that there are so many verses of various kinds that try to preclude the idea of Trinity. Once a certain rabbi asked in a Christian college if God wanted people not to make the mistake of believing in Trinity, what would he tell you? What kind of a verse would you expect somewhere in the Bible that would say this is not a true concept? And they came out with all kinds of verses that they would think that should be there. And in fact, all those verses exist. If you look all over the Bible, there are actually all kinds of verses to preclude this idea. No matter how many times the Christians will keep saying that it's 3 in 1 and it's all really monotheism, from Jewish point of view, it's a completely wrong idea. It cannot possibly be a principle of faith, as I said, but moreover, it's completely wrong and it's against the most important principle of our faith, that God is absolutely one in every kind of sense that's possible. So this is another very important argument. The third most important thing is, of course, what separates us as Orthodox Jews from the rest of the society is keeping the commandments. So again, the commandments, as the Bible tells us, are given forever. And as I just said, that even when the discussion is about the end of days, how the people will repent and keep all these laws that are mentioned in the Torah. The whole point of the Torah and the whole idea when Mashiach comes, when Messiah comes, is that people will start keeping the commandments better, not worse. So if the idea of Christianity for the last 2,000 years is that a vast majority of commandments are gone, then why do you need Messiah in the first place? What did Messiah for? What's the point? If the basic idea, right? For instance, one of the people just commented on the video I made quite recently, a few days ago, basically, about Sukkot, and we were reading in Haftorah. Haftorah is a very small portion of a prophet that we read after reading the portion of the Bible. This is the common custom of the Jewish people. Besides reading from the Chumash, from 5 books of Moshe, where we read everything, there's also a small percentage of prophets that made it into Haftarah. Very small. It's about maybe 1/10 of the prophetic words made it, because the rabbis used to give a kind of lecture after reading the Torah based on some verse from a prophet, and that's why the custom is to read a few verses from a prophet that somehow relate to the weekly reading of the Torah. So the Haftarah, this reading of the prophet during Sukkot, was from the end of Zechariah. So some Christian is writing to me what he thinks is proofs again of Messiah. Of course, they all think that they have all these proofs because of hints here and there. But that same passage from Zechariah, which of course is the reason why it's read on Sukkot, talks about that in the end of days, all the nations will come to celebrate Sukkot. They all come to us, to the Jewish people, to celebrate Sukkot, right? Not Christmas, not some other Christian holiday, right? It's everything is going to be with keeping better the commandments. A lot of the commandments that don't apply today, or don't fully apply, will apply in the times of the Mashiach, the times of Messiah. So this whole idea, therefore, is totally contradictory to the Jews. By the way, notice that we're talking about Jews specifically. With non-Jews, as I said, we don't want everybody to convert and keep all the commandments of the Torah. We don't force anybody or even encourage anybody to convert. But we're talking about the Jewish people at least. So this whole idea that Christians have is contradicted by numerous writings in the Torah, and that's in fact what the prophets were doing too, mostly. The later prophets were mostly trying to encourage people to keep the Torah laws, not to discard them as Christians did. Like I said, at the end of the day, Christianity became a non-Jewish religion, so the fact that they don't keep all the commandments in the Torah is actually okay. They don't have to. But when they're trying to convert us or to encourage us, they have to remember that by us, the laws are forever and ever. And this is true about every Jew. Any person who is born Jewish doesn't have a choice. From our point of view, a person who is born Jewish has to keep the commandments. Of course, if a person never learned, if a person was born in a non-religious family, it's really not their fault that they don't keep. The majority of Jews today don't keep Shabbat, for instance, Sabbath. But At least ideally, that's what we're hoping for. And certainly in the times of Mashiach, this is part of really the main part of what Mashiach will accomplish. He'll bring the Jewish people completely in tshuva. Whoever was not observant will become observant. And that's what we're hoping for. So therefore, there's no point of trying to talk to us and encourage us or persuade us. And as I said, I'm not going to be able to answer all the comments that might appear on this video. I don't have the time at all. I work as a programmer, and I also make shiurim. I make lessons in Russian mostly. In English I only make a few lessons a week, but in Russian I make more than usually at least a couple of lessons every day. And I also have a group of people that I teach on Skype in Russian, so therefore I don't really have time to answer every comment, but I just want to present a Jewish point of view. So it's just that. Nobody's trying to persuade anybody, and in my opinion, we should just agree to disagree until when the true Mashiach comes. You could wait whatever, right? The non-Jews, the religious Christians can wait for whatever they think is right, and we will wait for the Mashiach that will accomplish the things that the prophets predicted. And when this utopian time will come, it will be good for everybody. And on this I'm going to end. And as I said, this is an exclusion kind of video, not for the Jewish people, but specifically to answer the kinds of comments I get from Christians, even though my channel is not really for spreading Judaism to Christians. As I mentioned again, and I will emphasize one more time, we're not trying to convert anybody or even encourage anybody to convert to Judaism. Exactly the opposite is true. As far as we're concerned, a righteous non-Jew is a righteous person and will be respected for being righteous and being moral and good. And I personally do appreciate a lot of times the Americans that are more religious, that generally support Israel. Among Protestants, there's quite a bit of support of Israel. This is very important, I think, and they certainly will get reward for that. But I definitely do not appreciate when I get all these comments from Christians who think that they understand the Bible better than we do, even though it's our book, we read it in the original, and who think that they can encourage us that by reading Isaiah 53, of course, we'll obviously change our mind. That's not the case at all. By the way, with specific proofs and the little details, every single proof of that the missionaries use can easily be discarded, and not just by Jews, by non-Jews themselves. Very interesting situation. Today, there are plenty of Bible editions, for instance, that think that Isaiah 53 is talking about the Jewish people in general, not a specific individual, and not about Mashiach, Messiah. I'm talking about the Christian translations. Plenty of them say that this is a typical Isaiah song, one of the many songs which talks about the nation of Israel. Right? This suffering servant is the nation of Israel. This is just an example that you don't even need to look in Jewish sources to reject many of these proofs. So you could look in Christian sources too, and many Christians today agree that they don't have any real proofs. They can have beliefs. Belief is one thing, but in terms of proofs, in terms of intellectual proofs, like I said, even if they had stronger proofs, the more general picture completely rejects it. But the truth of the matter is all these proofs can easily be rejected by just reading even a lot of times a modern Christian commentary and translation. So again, I don't want to encourage anybody to convert to Judaism. I'm only presenting the point of view of Orthodox Jews. And on this I'm going to end for today.